been put on timeout? Sometimes I think God is using this virus that has taken over the United States the last 4 weeks. He's using it for his purposes to put us on a timeout. Now, when my daughter, one of my 2 daughters, I will not mention her name, but she was the oldest daughter, and when we were in Rhode Island, in Wakefield, Rhode Island, and she was about 4 years old, there were times when she did things that her parents deemed worthy of having a timeout for. And so I would say to her, daughter, eldest daughter, 4-year-old daughter, it's time for you to go sit on the stairs for 10 minutes and take time to think about your behavior and see if it needs to change a little bit. So go take a 10-minute timeout on the stairs. Now, at 4 years old, and being raised by 2 parents who had degrees in psychology, she maybe picked up a little on that because her response was this: Dad, you want me to stay 10 minutes? Yeah, make it 5. Make it 5. Sometimes when we're in the midst of the pressure of life and we feel like we're on a timeout, we want to bargain with God and say, okay, God, I've had enough. I've learned my lesson. But God has a lesson to teach us. And we need to be ready to have ears to hear. For the last month, my life has been anything but routine. All of the things that I had planned out for the last month went down the tubes when this virus took over. And as many of you know, my family got it. Right now, I feel like Superman because my wife and I have both had the virus. So as far as I know, we can't get it and we can't give it. Now, maybe that's not right. I'm still wearing my mask. But it's a liberating feeling to have already been through it. But it sure threw my routine off. And you know, one thing that happens, even to pastors, maybe especially to pastors, is they get a little too familiar with God. You know, and there's a routine. Okay, I'm going to study my Bible at this time in the day, and I'm going to prepare for my sermon, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it almost becomes like it's just a job rather than a relationship. I don't know if you have had that experience or not, but that's been the case for me. And you know what happens? At some point, God needs to get our attention. And he certainly finds some interesting ways to get our attention. Who would have ever thought that he would take the whole United States and shut it down so that nobody's going to work for the most part, the way they usually do. Nobody's interacting with their neighbors for the most part like they usually do. No one's taking the recreation or the restaurants or all of the parts of life that we usually take and taking them for granted anymore because everything changed when the virus hit the USA. God has a way of setting us down and saying, wait a minute, I want you to do more in your life. I want you to stop and to reevaluate and think about where your life is going and where it needs to be. And it's funny that this is the exact kind of thing that Jesus was dealing with his disciples about on the very eve of his crucifixion. You see, Jesus was about to be crucified, but at the same point, there was one more thing he wanted to say to his disciples. One more thing that he felt, if I don't get this across, we could lose everything. You see, for 3.5 years, Jesus had invested his life in his disciples. Everywhere that he went, they went. Everything that he did, they saw. They could interact with him. He invested his life in 12 men. In 12 disciples. And he was depending on that investment to change the world. And now it comes down to the very eve of his crucifixion. And there he is with them. He knows the suffering. He's about to go into the Garden of Gethsemane where he sweats great drops of blood. But before that, he has to tell his disciples something that will make all the difference in their lives. It'll make the difference between them becoming world changers and them just having their world around them fall apart. His crucifixion, Jesus said, I've put all my eggs in one basket. If you 12 don't get it, it's not happening. You've got to get it or the church doesn't exist. If you 12 don't get it, there is no one today that's alive that will be able to carry on the church. Now in our country, a lot of us are starting to be concerned about the bottom line. Are we going to be able to bring our businesses back? Are we going to be able to get our jobs back? Are we going to be able to produce something? Are we going to be able to employ, to keep these jobs and these businesses going? Are people going to be able to be employed? What's the bottom line? Well, when Jesus talks to his disciples, he's addressing the same question. What is spiritually going to be the bottom line for your life when all is said and done? And so he uses the analogy of a vineyard. And most of us in California are familiar with vineyards. A lot of times when we get up and we look across the street or in our neighborhoods, we see vineyards. So Jesus uses the analogy of a vineyard to help describe what's going to be the bottom line for our lives. And so I want you to listen as I read the first 8 verses of John chapter 15, where Jesus addresses this topic and he talks about the bottom line being fruit. And so listen to the word fruit as I read this passage and see if you can start to gather what Jesus says we need to do in order to have a bottom line that's in the plus column. He says, I am the vine and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the words which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you, as a branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. He goes on to say, I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered. And they gather them and they throw them in the fire and they are burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire and it shall be done to you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. So you will be my disciple.